Hey, this is Ian Carlin with the Empty Cup Podcast. I'm here in studio over Skype with my friend Shad Scott. And boy, do we have a discussion for you today. We are going to be talking about whether or not you are in a martial arts cult and how to tell if you're in a martial arts cult. So that's kind of going to be what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm real fortunate to have Shad here with me because not only does he have a background in martial arts, but he has a background in psychology as well. And we both have a background in martial arts, and we both have a background in having experiences um, with martial art cults. Hey, Shad, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being on the program today. So let's start off here by quickly kind of defining, what would you consider to be a cult in the first place? And then we can take that word and then we can kind of apply it to, whether or not a martial art that you belong to, a martial art gym that you belong to is a cult. So what is a cult?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I'd give you an academic definition. I would just say, based on my research, I would say is usually there's characteristics of a cult. You have a charismatic leader that commands unquestioned obedience and loyalty. You have
Mm,
believers and non-believers. You
mm,
have kind of a codependency between the followers and the leader, where the followers are getting some type of void filled by the leader, and the leader's getting his some type of validation of their greatness.
right. Okay. Those are all great things. And I wanted to preface that with a couple of things too. I mean, or add to it by saying, before we go into what martial arts are called, I wanted to say a couple things. Um, Number one, we are not necessarily talking about a particular style of martial arts. We're talking about maybe the way a martial arts school is ran, because you can have, like, for example, a martial arts school that is totally legit. Like, say, for example, one of the karate styles that I really like is Kyokushin, because they do resistance, they do full contact. That's not to say there aren't any holes in their system. They don't have any ground and you can't punch to the head, but these people do full contact and live resistance. So you can have a really good style and you can go to one school and it's run like a cult, and you can go to another school and it's run like a regular martial arts gym. So we're not commenting on style here, except to say this: while this seems to be, and I know this has been your experience as well, this seems to be more prevalent in traditional martial arts than like more modern combat. I'm not saying it couldn't happen at an MMA gym, but in my experience, it normally doesn't. It normally happens in the cult. I mean, in the traditional martial arts. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think with traditional martial arts, there is a lot of times there's something mystical or romanticized by people. It's romanticized by people. Eastern martial arts, traditional martial arts. It's a perfect vehicle for a cult because you have a lot of people that are looking for somebody to fill some kind of void, some kind of, it could be a father figure, it could be, I'm looking for someone to make me feel better about myself, and me associating myself with this person, this charismatic
Right.
person who's telling me everything I want to hear.
Hmm.
Um,
It provides a sense of community. You
sure,
know,
sure,
and it's kind of
absolutely.
interesting too, because we find it in we find it in the martial arts, and it's not like, uh, you know, we you find that mentality in like religious groups as well, and you find that mentality in martial arts. And I'm not going to say that it's absent from other organizations, but it's not like we find like a cult baseball team. you know, like where
Right.
the like
Right.
you go to the baseball team or the football team, for some reason this is like around martial arts, religious things and martial arts. And I think that part of it, particularly with the Eastern martial arts, is that there is a sense of religiosity where you go to an MMA gym and the arts practiced in an MMA gym, they generally have dropped any type of esoteric ideas out. They don't, you don't go to an MMA gym and talk about chi or energy, where you would go to, a lot of the Asian martial arts, whether or not they're good or bad, they have those conversations, so they do kind of encroach on the religious, and that brings to it that kind of religious mentality, that kind of mentality that is seeking for the esoteric.
Sure, and you actually you need that in order to have a cult in the first place. You have to have some level of fantasy. I mean, if it's based on reality, then the instructor is going to be testing his stuff. So as long as there's an
Right.
element of fantasy, that instructor has some control over his students, right?
Yeah, I
Especially if
think
they're
so.
never challenging or testing them. And so with MMA or boxing or any martial arts school, you're testing the instructor, and you're it's a give and take type of thing. There's no need for fantasy.
Mhm.
Right. There's no need for belief.
Right. Right. And the sad part about it is you have to have this student teacher relationship in order to create this cult like behavior. You have to have those two things together. And with the teacher, it's like you're saying that the person's charismatic. He knows he's often narcissistic. He knows how to tell you, he knows how to tell you what you want to hear. And at the same time, you have to have the student relationship where the student has a void to fill. And there's a legitimate way to fill those voids even with martial arts, and there's a non-legitimate way which makes it cultic. So, for example, it does provide stability. There isn't anything wrong with wanting to belong to a group. There isn't anything wrong with looking for a father figure. A lot of people, like even myself, I came from a broken home, and grew, and I found a lot of group type of setting in a family kind of atmosphere in martial arts, and maybe that's why in my early years I kind of got sucked into it. So there's having those voids filled. You know what I'm saying? It isn't a bad thing, and martial
No,
arts can fill.
for sure. Probably the difference is an instructor that's secure in himself is trying to help you become self-sufficient. A instructor who is, let's say we're saying a cult mentality instructor, for example, it's the relationship is to keep you dependent on them. So in order to
Ooh,
keep
that's
you
a good
dependent
point.
on them, they have to create a vacuum where there's nothing outside the vacuum. There's no schools. There's no other martial arts schools outside that vacuum. They're all shit, and everything
Yeah.
inside that in their circle is the only way to get to their skill level or to progress.
Right.
Everybody they want to lay claim and ownership over the mantle of whatever system or style and say that they have they usually have some type of fantastic claims that are usually too good to be true.
Right. I think that is awesome. I think that you hit the nail right on the head with that. And it's so good that I have to repeat it because that is spot on. And that is you have somebody who has a void in their life, and martial arts can fill that void. A good martial arts school will try to make you more independent, where a cult martial arts school will notice that void and try to make you more dependent on it. And I think that's amazing. I really do. I think that was incredible insight right there. We're going to open up a Shad Scott martial arts school, and we're all going to be loyal to Shad Chad no matter what, right?
Right.
No, that was
Right.
no, that was seriously some good stuff right there, brother. Um,
Yeah.
so,
Thanks. I think a lot of it is with martial arts. The key is really is to become critical. Here's what it is with the cult mentality. The very thing they try to suppress is critical thinking. They're threatened by it.
mm,
Okay, if you start using critical thinking and independent thought, you become an outsider. You're a threat to the group, and the
mhm,
leader can become very hostile towards you, and you can then
mhm.
be pushed out towards the outside of the group
So,
if you're using critical independent thinking skills.
right, right. Well, okay. Well, let's talk about a little bit about our backgrounds in this and go through this some of these aspects because we've listed out a couple of actual aspects point by point so that you can kind of evaluate whether or not you are in a cult like martial art. And I would say number one, and this isn't in any, for people listening, this isn't in any like, this isn't like number one, this is the most important. It's just a list. You could have the last one number one or the first one number one, whatever. This is just a list of things that we've noticed that are kind of common for martial arts that develop a cult-like mentality instead of trying to make you a good martial artist. And number one, I think, is that a lot of times in these schools, um, the teacher is not always honest with their background. They're not always honest with their training. I've noticed this and I've experienced this. It's you can't really hunt down their lineage or their instructor's instructor. System is a great example of this. We don't even know where Systema comes from. We just know that, what I heard was that one guy learned one of the main guys in Systema learned it from his stepfather um, who was a bodyguard, and other than that, we don't know where it comes from. Um, and I can't think of too many more systems where there's a lot of BS in it. It's always like, oh, some Chinese guy came over and studied and all this stuff. This happened in the '80s a lot with uh, the ninjutsu. You had these people making stuff up, like, oh, this guy from Japan came over and trained 20 of us. Oh, what was his name? How can we get a hold of him? Oh, I don't know. He was just here on a student visa and he's never been back. And now we know this martial art. These people are not always honest with their own background. They could be competent themselves, but they're not always honest with their background. Go ahead if you're going to say something there.
Right. I think you're right. You hit it right on the head. They start off with some story that you cannot refute. It's the analogy I like to use is I got a spaceship in my backyard, and I go out of my way to tell everybody I have a spaceship in my backyard. And then when you ask about it, can I come and see it? I'm like, no, I'm sorry, you're not ready. Right.
Right.
When you're ready,
There-
you can see the spaceship in my backyard. Well, then I would just say, hey, if I wasn't ready to see the spaceship, then why are you telling me about the spaceship? Right?
yeah.
So
Right.
you go out of your way to tell this fantastic claim, and then when someone refutes it, you just try to dismiss that.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so the next one would be there's no testing of the leader's skill or story. I think that's the story is true. There's no testing of his skill. Um, how have you seen this happen before?
Oh, for sure. And if you do, it can lead to the leader getting very hostile towards you, or the group will become hostile towards you.
Yeah, yeah.
So you
So
shouldn't hit the instructor. You should treat the instructor like a deity. Like don't punch Jesus. This is this is our leader. You wouldn't
Yeah.
punch them, right? So they deify these people a lot of times,
Mm.
and you shouldn't challenge, or you shouldn't do anything where there's give and take.
Mm. Yeah, you shouldn't. Yeah, and didn't you know? And anytime when you're with these people, because you mentioned a school that you studied at, which we're going to kind of remain nameless, but you had mentioned this school where the instructor wouldn't even want to fight. Like most of the classes, you like did some exercises, and then like you wouldn't even ever fight.
No, we wouldn't test anything. It was like boot camp the whole time, like solo boot camp. And I'm like thinking like I could do this cardio at home, really.
Hmm.
I'm just paying for like some like cardio class. I could go to the gym and do this. But at the very end of the class, they would do some chi sao, but it was only for like a few minutes. And if you like hit somebody, they would be apologizing. So like the etiquette and everything was all set up to prevent you from ever testing any theories. It was so structured,
Mm.
like a pyramid, so structured
Mm.
that there was no room for you to challenge anything. And I always thought it was really strange. Um, Not only that, I mean, this
Yeah.
kind of hits on something else. Is a lot of times with these groups is they will put the group as more important than individual relationships. So they'll distort really what that means. Like, for example, I at this school, I asked out one of the girls at the end of the class, and
Hmm.
she acted like I had like her brother had asked her out on a date. She says, "Well, I can't go on a date with you because that's against the school rules." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You're my brother." It's like, all right, I didn't
Oh
know. I didn't
man.
know. I didn't know you were my sister all this time. So
I've been having some pretty unsavory thoughts this whole class about my sister, right?
yeah, this whole time I didn't know I was committing incest in this whole group. So yeah,
Oh,
and the ironic thing is the instructors a lot of times are not doing what they're saying. So they're telling the students you can't date, and then these
mhm.
instructors a lot of times are doing these things. So a lot of times
The instructors can date the
cults involves
students.
they involve a lot of times they involve sex. A lot of times they involve money. Money and sex are
The,
two key aspects of cults, huge
right,
aspects.
right. Yeah, yeah, religiously and in the martial arts as well. You know, you get a cult, it's always at the top. The guy is having the most sex, the guy is getting the most money. That's,
Right.
that's the definition right there. Uh, you know, I, what you said there kind of reminded me of Systema when I went to the Systema camp as well, because I learned like seriously like one move when we were there, one actual tangible thing that I could say, oh, this is what you do when somebody does this. The whole class, the whole time we were up there, we did breathing and we did running and push-ups and we did these things where we would hit each other. But there was never like any like serious instruction on anything. It was it was just a big cardio thing, and I felt really ripped off. I ended up paying $2,000 plus expenses, to get there and stay, um, to learn how to, run. It was just the biggest waste of time. I was really super disillusioned, or I should say disillusioned. Maybe my eyes were turned on by going there. But yeah, I mean, and then the guy, he took me to the ground. I didn't fall for him, but I also didn't resist him either. And there was always this kind of like, I'm not sure we want to resist. I mean, I felt that way even when I was up there. I was just like, okay, he's going to come put his hands on me. Should I try to do something or not? Should I try to not? You know what I mean? It's like you're almost scared to do it because you're scared that not only that person will get upset, but the group will be upset with you, for the whole
Right.
week or whatever. Because they
Right.
have command of the group, they have command of the loyal followers, right? So that's
Oh,
another one. So what's
for
that?
sure. And a lot of times when people are emotionally invested in things like that, they don't want to experience a conflict between their beliefs and all the emotion they put into something and reality. So when they run across something that runs in conflict with that, they distort it. They do some way to distort reality to justify feeling good about what they're doing and what they're investing in. So even if you do,
Yeah.
even if when they're exposed, you'll amazingly the believers will stay. They'll find some way to justify and rationalize, you know,
I did that. I
what
did
they're
that
doing.
when I was younger, especially with the first martial arts system that I was in. I made excuses in my head, and you do it
Mhm.
because you don't want to think that this person who's teaching you may have lied. You know, you do it
Mhm.
because you think, oh, maybe I heard him wrong. You know, I remember the one instructor. He would like tell stories, and then he would tell them differently, and then he would not just the same story differently, but like flat out contradictions. Like
Mhm.
one time he'd say something like, well, I've never ever used a flying kick in my whole life, and they're kind of dumb. And then the next time he'd be like, well, I used a flying kick. I saw these people, they were trying to rape a girl, and I did a flying kick on them. And it was just like, and it was just, and when I heard it, at first I was just like, um, maybe I heard it wrong, or I try to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he, the first time he forgot that that he had done a technique, because I've done that before. I've done the thing before where like I'll say something, and then like later I'll remember that actually that what I said was wrong. So I sure try to give that to them, that benefit of the doubt. But then you hear it one time, you can get away with it, but then you start hearing this habitual type of lying and grandiosity, and at some point the student either has to accept this bullshit, or they have to um, they they have to stand up and say, hey, I no longer want to be part of this system. And that's happened with me on a couple of occasions, unfortunately. But eventually you stand up and you say, well, look, I'm not going to put up with this. But most people, I'll be honest with you, Shad, I think most people are just too afraid to stand up and be a man, and say, hey, this isn't right.
Well, right. I mean, I think that's common with any group of people. We are social creatures, acceptance, belonging, those things are really important to us. We're hardwired to feel that. Well, at least most of us are
Yeah.
hardwired to want to belong to a group and to be accepted. And, social conformity is huge. It's a huge factor in staying in those groups. Um, Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And then I've seen it too with the students of these people. So let's kind of digress from there, because we gave two things about the instructors. That a lot of times the instructors aren't always they're not always honest with their background, and the instructors themselves don't want to be tested. And I've noticed before, somebody will come in with a challenge fight. It won't be the instructor who fights them. They'll send one of their students to fight them or something
Yeah.
like that. You know, um, but let's move into kind of the student mentality, because a lot of times what happens is that cults get created, martial art cults get created by the students sometime. You know what I mean?
Oh, they're a
They
part of
like
it. They're a part of that
yeah, like
equation.
well, yeah, but even they'll even go beyond the instructor. So like for example, with the Wing Chun that we learned, um uh not only okay, so there were some things at the top end that I had problems with. We've talked about that before. We don't have to get into that here, but the students would go beyond. So, there was one fight that this top instructor did that was on film that a lot of us watched. It was the Hawaii fight. Everybody called it the Hawaii fight because um, uh, this guy fought a guy in Hawaii, and he beat him pretty good. But if you, and I saw the fight, and I actually had it on VHS at one time, and um, and then I would hear the students talk about the fight and tell other students about the fight that hadn't seen it yet, and it was radically changed. It was just like, I saw that fight. It was a good fight. Our Sifu won, but you're almost making it seem like he floated in there. His feet didn't touch the ground, and he was throwing chain punches while his feet didn't touch the ground. You know what I mean? It's like,
right. I mean, eyewitness testimony, firsthand accounts, they're not very good. We know that. Scientifically, they're awful. Like we can fill in the space so easily with our own biases. Our own perception can distort reality so quickly over time, completely rewrite history, and completely come up with some fantasy that's so far from the truth. And you give it enough time, it can become like, someone can become a demigod, give them enough time. Look at Bruce Lee, perfect example. I mean, this is, you cannot get consistent stories a lot of times with Bruce Lee. There's so many inconsistencies. There's things like he used to kick a 600-pound bag. Like nobody could, if you kicked a 600-pound bag, do you know what that would do to your leg? It would ruin your leg. But people, it's just evolved. I'm sure he did a lot of great things, but I think with our heroes, we put them on a pedestal. And in order to keep them on that pedestal, we have to strip them of all of the things that made them human. They can't be human. They can't have weaknesses. They have to be some type of God. And that says a lot to do with us as human beings, that we need that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And we can, I think that one of the big keys is that the students lie for the instructor. The students will lie for the instructor. That's another sign that you're in a martial arts cult, is that the students will lie for the instructor. And we've seen this over and over again. Did you have any experience?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, do you have any experience in that?
I remember one experience where you told me once at a summer camp that some instructors were saying to you, asking you, would you die for your Sifu or something like that? It's some kind of like, they were like, I guess, trying to like pump you guys up.
Right. Yeah.
Asking, what would you do for your Sifu? And eventually it got to the point where they're like, would you die for your Sifu? And you're like, well, I got to go. It started getting crazy.
That guy that we both know who lives in Orem was the guy who said that, as I recall. He said, I would die for my Sifu. I would die for my Sifu.
Yeah.
I actually had one guy tell me that he hopes that he died before his Sifu. So that was just crazy nonsense stuff, right?
Yeah, when you get that fanatical, that your identity is wrapped up in that to that point where you're willing to do things that you normally wouldn't do. Another thing I think is you get people that come up with magical explanations for things that are so mystical you will never understand. Really just basic stuff. It keeps you ignorant. It keeps them in a state of being untouchable. They're never challenged. Let me give you a good example of this. I don't know if you've seen this video, but Ashita Kim. You know who Ashita Kim is? Okay.
Yeah.
So Ashita Kim, he has a camera like on the ground, okay, and he's doing the filming. So he puts the camera on the ground. He digs a pit. He goes in it. He's talking about leaping Kong. It's the art of jumping. Okay, it's a ninja jumping move. Okay.
Yeah.
After take after take, he digs the pit deeper and deeper to the point where the pit is over his head. Okay, and all of a sudden you see Ashita Kim flying out of the pit. Okay, to show his leaping Kong video ability. And you never can see in the pit, right? Am I supposed to believe that Ishida Kim jumped 6 feet vertically. Like, you could take the best basketball player in the world, Michael Jordan, best jumpers, couldn't even get close to that. So
Well,
it would probably be more likely that there are midgets in that pit throwing Ishida Kim out. I'm going to believe that before
right,
I believe that Ishida Kim jumped 6 feet out of a pit. So,
right, right. Well, yeah, yeah, and that is, if I could jump 6 feet in the air, like like out like that, I would be filming it. You know what I mean?
right.
There would be no question at all. I would not have my camera in the distance away, and the dirt up here, up over my head, and then I'm somehow jumping up over the dirt. No, you would see that stuff. You would see that shit. If I could jump 6 feet in the air, you better believe I'd be making a YouTube channel off of me doing that. Everything, everything in the world.
Right. You
But
think you could get somebody videotaping you in the pit jumping out, but he can't
right,
do that. He has to put the camera out so that you can't see him. You could just see the top of his head in the pit, and all of a sudden he leaps up out of it. And
I had that.
it's
Yeah, I had a similar experience I shared with you before, where and this was like years ago. I think I was only like 17 or 18 years old, and I was talking to a guy who said that his style, he blended the style of Tai Chi and guerrilla warfare, and he said that he just jumped up and kicked the ceiling. He told me that. He goes, I jumped up and kicked the ceiling just a minute ago. I was like,
yeah,
well,
so
can you show
fast you
me?
didn't see it.
Can you show me again? And he was just like, no, it takes up too much chi to be able to do that. It takes a lot of energy. He goes, but I did it. I did.
Well, you hear that. I mean, I've heard some of the followers of the founder of Aikido, Yoshiba, claim that he could teleport like the movie Jumper.
Right.
I've heard that about other kung fu masters, and I'm not saying Yoshiba was saying that, but some of these students were propagating these stories that he could teleport. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, if you could do something like that, don't you think you would go to the Amazing Randy, be like, "Hey, I'm going to take the $1 million challenge"?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Of course. I mean, I know I would. I totally would. Um, but that, I told you before about that situation I had up at the Systema camp as well. And I hate to just sit here and bag on Systema. Maybe we might do a pro and con video on Systema, because I do think that there are some valuable aspects, but there is some bullshittery in Systema that you just can't get past. But I was in this. We were in the cafeteria. It wasn't like at one of the seminars or anything. We were in the cafeteria, and there was these two guys that were next to me, and they just started like going, whoa, woo, like kind of like getting attention. And they're like, well, and there are people walking around and back and forth, and they were just close enough to me that I happened to hear them. They said, whoa, like, oh man, good, well, that was cool, and stuff, and just stuff like that that you'd look over and say, what's going on? And they said that one of the instructors in Systema there just disappeared, like in thin air. He had just disappeared. And I was just like, well, what? I was like, what? No, oh yeah, he vanished right in front of our eyes. He was right in front of our eyes, and he vanished. And he said, oh, maybe it was some psychological trick he did there, trying to talk about it and explain it. But it's always fantastic, some type of fantastic thing. That's another sign that you're in a cult, is in a martial arts cult, is there's always some like secret move. There's like some secret chi power move, or some type of endless rank, or something like that.
Right. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's hilarious. I mean, that people would
I
think he's teleporting. What are you saying? He was disappearing and coming back into existence or something?
I don't. I have no idea. I mean, they told me, oh, he just disappeared right in front of us and stuff. I'm like, oh, well, get that on the Amazing Randy. Hey, I thought about the the Michael Jordan. The reason why Michael Jordan doesn't is because he doesn't use his chi properly. Just
Yeah.
imagine how high that dude could jump
Yeah.
in back, mid 90s if he would have just, found Akita Shim, or what's his name? Shim
Ashita
Akita or
Kim.
what?
You need to learn
Ashita
it.
Kim.
It's very
He,
important.
he had just learned, if he had just gone to Ashita Kim and learned the chi, man, he would have been so much better. He'd been MVP he wouldn't have lost that MVP to Karl Malone that year. Tell
Yeah.
you what, he would have been MVP every year. So too bad for him. He got a lot of natural talent, but boy, you got to put that chi behind it.
Yeah, we're talking about 6-foot vertical. He could jump over
Right,
people's heads.
right. Okay, there's a couple other things I want to cover here, and that's important to know to when people go in and they evaluate whether or not the system that they're in is a cult. And the next one is that all other martial arts are crap. All other martial arts have nothing good to offer. They're the best martial art, and they might even be the best martial art within that martial art system. They're the best Wing Chun of all the Wing Chuns, or they're the best Kyokushin karate out of all the Kyokushin karates. They're
Right.
the best. That seems to be, and often it's not like, okay, so at some point you choose a brand of martial arts because you think it's the best, in some respect. That's just common. I wouldn't go to a martial arts school that I thought was crap. Okay, I wouldn't.
Right.
I'm going where I go, and I learned what I learned because I thought that under the circumstances it was the best of what it had to offer. But this is what it's like. Okay, so like let's say I have a $20 bill. I'm not going to deny the legitimacy of somebody who has like a $10 bill. That's still legal currency. I might say that my $20 bill is better than their $10 bill, but I'm not going to say their $10 bill doesn't have anything to offer. But this is the analogy. This is what it's like. It's like I have a $20 bill and everybody else has got monopoly money.
Right.
Does that analogy make sense?
Right. Everybody else didn't learn the real system.
Everybody else's system is crap, and they bag on other systems
and
constantly.
they want you to take it at face value. Going back to I have to use Ashita Kim again. I'm sorry, because
Right.
he had one of the best stories of all time. I couldn't help but to read it. He said that his style of ninjutsu came from the Black Dragon Society under Count Dante. If you know who Count Dante was, he was like this big martial artist in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. He had his own cult going on. And he said that the Black Dragon Society could be traced back to Atlantis. Okay. So you're talking about before Plato. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So ninjas actually are from Atlantis. And that's probably why we can't find Atlantis, right? Because
Right.
ninjas made it here.
Because they're hiding it. They're masking their ninjutsu stuff.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So that's such an incredible story. It's so incredible. You can't validate anything of it, anything from it. It's just so and you're supposed to take it at face value.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed before is that this is where you can have a legitimate school or, practicing a legitimate style, but still they bag on other styles, and some of them do and some of them don't. So like I've been to Wing Chun schools where they don't care if you do other arts. They could care less. They're like, oh, that's cool. You do jujitsu too. That's awesome. And then there are other schools, particularly one we came from, where everybody was like, everybody in especially like the student instructors were like, oh, don't ever go to that school. That's just junk. That's not even worthy of being called martial arts, kind of a thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like they just bag on another system. It's like no other systems have anything to offer. And not only does no other systems have anything to offer, but they never test it. You know, they
Right.
never test it.
Well, it's
Yeah.
like it's everything's black and white and everything's in generalities. And the systems they talk about, they're like talking about people. Like karate, it's bad. Like karate's like some guy, right? You're, there's
Yeah.
no variations in karate. Everybody who trains in karate sucks. You know,
Right.
there's a million
Right.
of them, they all suck, right?
Right. Well, we
Masayama
had
didn't
some.
exist. He was
Right.
only good because he was doing Wing Chun.
The only reason is because there was some, maybe he was like inadvertently doing Wing Chun. I've told this story, a lot of times, about how when I was a BUG student in Wing Chun, how I got locked out by jujitsu, by a jujitsu guy. And I didn't convert to jujitsu right away. I thought, well, I just needed to study my Wing Chun better so that I can hit him on the way in. Um, but the the BS that I heard later, because like I was in class one time, and this guy was just bagging on it, just saying, "Oh, if any jujitsu guy comes in, I'm just gonna hit him," And I was just like, you don't know what it's like. I know what it's like. Yeah, theoretically you could hit him on the way in, but most often you don't, and you're going to get taken to the ground. I said, it's just this BS that every other system is completely illegitimate, and their system is the only system that's legitimate. You know,
Right.
uh,
Well, it's all theoretical. It's always
right?
theoretical, you notice. Um, yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
here's another thing. I mean, one thing that I've noticed is a lot of times these martial arts instructors don't just think that they are good at their martial art when they got their black belt. Not only did they get a black belt, but they're also a marriage and family therapist. They're a doctor. Um, they're a um, they're a dog trainer. you know, they
Right.
know everything
Right.
because
Oh,
getting a black
yeah.
belt includes all of these other things. They're experts in military self-defense and warfare and everything stuff that has nothing to do with their martial art at all.
Yeah. Yeah, they become experts in how to train your dog, right? I mean, it's just crazy. And they try to force that. That's one of the aspects of that, is they try to like tell you how you should interact with your wife or your family or stuff like that. It's just incredible. I think that's one of the big ones, is that they try to cross over into unrelated fields, and then they suddenly become experts in those unrelated fields, and it's just ridiculous. Um, you were telling me before about like this guy up in Orem was trying to get people to stay after class to hang out, and like wouldn't let them go home to their families or something like that.
Yeah, that was kind of the culture there. So if you were to like go home, they'd be like, "Where are you going?" You're like, "I'm going to go see my family. I got to go home." Well, this is your family. So you're like, "Okay, well,
Oh man.
yeah." So it's
Oh, they try to create inner circles,
when people are
like,
threatened by you having your own family, you got a problem. You got
right,
a
right.
cult. When they want you to be separated from, your loved ones, it's
It becomes a big problem, that's for sure.
yeah.
All right, so, um, boy, I think that's about. I don't. I'm sure we could say a lot more on the subject, but I think that those are the the signs. Those are the keys. I think let's just run through them again so that everybody has them down. And that is, we'll go through it from the last one up to the first one. And that is that the instructor, number one, often crosses over into non-related fields, and tries to run your life outside his field of expertise. So that's one of them. There's that student mentality where the students will lie for the instructors, and change stories and things like that. Every other martial art is BS. There's no legitimacy at all in any other martial arts. It's not like you have a 20 and other martial arts have a $10 bill. It's you have a $20 bill and every other martial art has monopoly money. There's always some secret move, always some type of secret move that you need to learn, or another rank that's the above Sifu. I'll make you Sifu, but if you get this, then you'll be above Sifu. That kind of a thing. They don't. The instructors often won't be tested or won't be challenged in their skills. And the last thing is that it's very difficult to track down the instructor's legitimacy as far as their training is concerned. It's always some secret type of training. So look for those, one or all of them, or 3 or 4 of them, or whatever will let you know if you are in a martial arts school that is more like a cult. Any final words you have to say about this, Shad?
I think that's it, man. That was cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the Empty Cup podcast. If you like what you heard today, please do me a favor and give us a 5-star review on iTunes. That helps people find the podcast. And also share this on your favorite social media. Share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, share it on whatever people share it on these days. And that would be a great help. If you're interested in following us and keeping up with us, you can go to Facebook / The Empty Cup Podcast, as well as on Twitter at Empty Cup Podcast. The is dropped, so it's just at Empty Cup Podcast. And I have a YouTube channel where I talk about training methods, and I do some vlogging outside of what you hear here. So I talk like training methods, like speeding up your hand work and things of that nature. So go to that. It's called Ronin JKD. Ronin JKD is the channel, and subscribe to that. That would be awesome. Thanks again, and until we meet again, please keep your gloves up